This is Long Way to the Top, and I'm your host, Shane Bryan. In the words of the immortal AC/DC, it is harder than it looks. These interviews will give you a glimpse into the lives of the artists that we've sung along with, danced and rocked out to. Some go deep into their past and others celebrate their recent releases. But all of them show that regardless of who you are, it's always a long way to the top. My next guest is Tony Butler, the original bass player for 80s Scottish rock outfit Big Country. He's worked with artists like Pete Townsend, Roger Daltry, the Pretenders, and Chrissie Hynde even asked him to join the Pretenders at one stage. It's actually his bass playing you hear on Back on the Chain Gang. In the time since Big Country, Tony Butler has released a book, Then Came the Great Divide, and he joins me on Long Way to the Top. Tony Butler, welcome.
Hello there, Shane.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much.
I noticed that you've got the Who shirt on and everything.
Oh, yes. You've got to support your favourite band, haven't you?
Are they your favourite band?
Probably. They're probably the best band I've ever seen to make me want to, or maybe want to do what I wanted to do. The Townsend family, Pete, their parents, Cliff and Betty, were very inspirational to me. And if I had any kind of mentors in my life, it was the Townsend family. Got to shout out for Paul and Simon as well, because I was their age group, and when I entered their household, I didn't really know what I was getting into, because I didn't know who the Who were really, and it wasn't until some time after my first meeting with Simon and Paul that I realised they had this older brother in this kind of quite large group.
Yeah, just a little band.
I think I saw Woodstock. My cousin took me to see Woodstock, and I thought, I know that bloke. I've seen him in Simon's bedroom playing guitar badly. And I kind of thought, well, there must be something in this, because I'd led a very sheltered sort of upbringing in West London, and rock and roll wasn't really on my landscape.
Yeah.
But when I got introduced to it, I kind of realised that that's where I kind of wanted to live, in the world of rock and roll. So I've got a lot to thank the Townsends for, and the Who were, to use a quaint old English expression, a bloody good group.
Yeah, they are. I mean, what makes a band like the Who just stand out? I mean, is it a chemistry where they all come together and they all just happen to bring the right mix, and suddenly you've got like the right cocktail?
Yeah, and I think more to do with of their time. From the beginning of the Who all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s. They were a band who budding young musicians like myself could characterize themselves on, and they could do it, and they just play simple chords, and they just string a few words together, and Daltry belts out the vocal, and it all works. I was very fortunate to see the Who in 1974 at the Charlton Athletic Football Ground in southeast London, and I think somebody told me that I was probably seeing them at their best because, number one, it was the original lineup. Two, they were just fabulous. I'd never been to an outdoor gig before. And I haven't been to one since, because when you see the best, why go for second best? And the only way that I could top that was by being in my own group. Yeah.
And just talking about bands like the Who, and you've worked with so many incredible artists of that similar ilk. You've had the opportunity to back a lot of them, to be on tour with them, bands like U2. There's a lot of, I guess, mystical, stuff around bands like, the Who, they're incredible, they've done this, they've done that. But when you get down to tin tacks, they're 4 blokes or 5 blokes or 6 blokes, however many people are in their band, and they are just there doing what they love. They're doing their passion.
Absolutely. And I think why I said earlier on, I think they were a band of their time, because I think the time that the Who sort of rose to power, to use that sort of quaint expression, the world was ready for it. There hadn't been anything like it. You had the clean cut Beatles, and you had the sort of slightly sort of more off color Stones and stuff like that. But the Who were kind of real grassroots. The Who were, well, I'm a London kid, and the Who were a London band, and we kind of really associated with that. Although, because of the color of my skin, I wasn't expected to like that kind of music. I was supposed to like black music, reggae and stuff like
blues. Yeah.
But I just decided that those loud prickly guitars made more of an impression in my head than anything else I'd heard. And and they were of their time. They were fantastic. The world needed a band like the Who, and and they were just their place in history will always be that in my opinion.
Were they the inspiration for you picking up the bass?
No.
What was that? Great answer. What was the inspiration? Yeah.
My inspiration was a broom handle. Because I loved Jimi Hendrix when I was a kid growing up, and and I kind of, you always dream I'd love to do that, and then my cousin, who was in the British Army, brought home a bass guitar made by a colleague of his out of paper mache with a wooden neck. And I had a look at this thing, and I thought, well, it's only got 4 strings, it can't be Jimi Hendrix for that. But I picked it up, and so that substituted a broom handle, because I used to stand in front of my mirror, put Jimi Hendrix on the record player, and stand and pretend to be Jimmy on my broomstick. But then I got this bass, and I thought, okay, well, I'll give that a go. And I kind of really enjoyed it, and I kind of connected with it. So I've always been a bass player, or more refined, I've always been a bass guitarist.
Yes.
I think it's a subtle difference, especially as I went down the rock music road,
Yeah, and so your style of bass, so there's a lot of different styles that you can play bass, and Flea, for example, from Red Hot Chili Peppers is a perfect example where he slaps the bass, What is your style?
My style was a plectrum.
Yeah.
Because I was able to get more noise out of the bass.
Yeah.
It's a bass guitar serves 2 roles, I think, in music, and it's there to complement the rhythm of a song and hold it down, particularly in sort of more dance orientated music. But with rock music, it was just an excuse to turn it up a bit more and be loud with it, but feature, come through, which is why I ended up really sort of loving people like John Entwistle, Chris Squire particularly. I mean, Chris Squire must have driven the rest of the band mad, because his bass was always so loud.
Yeah.
But it was a feature of what Yes were, that driving, cranky, mechanical, sort of rasping sound of his drove Yes music, and it was just stunning for somebody like me to hear. And I thought, well, that's what I want to do. And my contemporary, I like to think of him as a contemporary, was Jean-Jacques from Burnell from the Stranglers.
Yes.
I mean, he had an incredible bass tone, and I just thought, I want to be in that league. And I've always gone out of my way. I met Mike Rutherford from Genesis once, and I just wanted to stand there and talk to him about his sound and stuff.
Yes.
But I felt so geeky, I just completely wimped out. But I took on board what these people did through their music, rather than being that geek fan sort of saying, can you give me all the technical ins and outs? But all these bass players that I've named, all jumbled in my head for me to create something of my own, which I'm not sure whether I did or not, but it certainly fitted latterly with Big Country, because the bass was in essence a third guitar.
And I find your playing in Big Country very similar in sort of, I guess, the drive and the sound to, say, Adam Clayton in U2, where he it's almost, rather than just being part of the sound, like he stands out. Like And a lot of the early U2 songs, like New Year's Day, and I mean, they've got that driving bass sound. They've got that, Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was really important, particularly with the style of music that they played. It was important to me with the style of music that we were creating with Big Country to have something that made the whole really important and the sum parts just part of the game. But when it coalesced, it was fantastic. It worked really well. And I think a lot of contemporary bands, particularly with the sort of the four lineup sort of configuration, each instrument has to have a role that really consolidates the whole thing, because there are times, particularly with U2's music, there are times when the bass is just driving and there's no guitar, and then there's times when the guitar's really taken over, all the echoes sort of disappear. Yeah. But it's there to underpin Bono's kind of, real kind of passionate and beautiful voice. It's the same with other sort of contemporary lineup bands. I think each instrument should stand out and complement, rather than just being a vocalist with a backing band, and the bands, everybody plays within their place and within their space. Yes. So it's about attitude, which is the great thing about being in a band, because you can do that. You can express yourself in that way. Yes. With solo artists, I've done many sessions in the past where you're working with somebody who's essentially just a singer, singing somebody else's song with a bunch of musicians playing, and that sort of attitude is kind of frowned upon. Because no producer wants the instrumental artists to stand out over the main artist.
And it doesn't last long, does it? Really,
It doesn't last long. No, yeah, so no. It wasn't an area that I really wanted to get into. It was being in a band.
So your first band that you sort of have gone on record in saying that it was your first band. Maybe you were in others prior, but on the air. So you had Simon Townsend, which is Pete's brother. You had Mark Brzezicki, who is the drummer and one of your best friends. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
it
was progressive rock, wasn't it? Really?
Yes. Yeah, we were coming into our own just when sort of there was a sort of change and a revolution going on in British pop culture, and Simon and I had been sort of on the air in different configurations for some time. We were your classic local little band. We played at the local U club every month, and we just kind of did that. But we enjoyed playing music that lasted for more than 3.5 minutes.
Yeah,
and I suppose we were an early version of what people would call prog rock.
Yes,
which was nice. It was nice to play. Again, it's evoking that individualism within each instrument within a small format outfit. But we finally got down to a 3-piece when we got Mark on board, and then we were looking at maybe toughening up our sound and playing shorter songs.
Yeah,
and that's what we ended up going on tour with the Skids.
Right,
and it's the first time that I'd met, or any of us had met, Stuart and the rest of the gang, and I remember the Skids just being a phenomenal noise. Yeah. And I kind of thought, wow, I love this noise. I love this guitar, the guitars, bass, drums. I mean, it's a 4-piece band, making a huge noise, but each component was really special. And I was so taken by sort of the sound. I mean, I met Stuart on several occasions on that tour. But, when things went sort of pear-shaped for both entities, I think it was my intention for us to sort of drift together in order to see if something could be done. But, in between that, we had our myself and Mark particularly had our time with Pete Townsend, doing a couple of solo things and a couple of his solo albums. And then we then met with Ian Grant, who was at the time the Skids manager. And he said, well, look, they're putting, we've got this band who've just been thrown off an Alice Cooper tour. And the A&R people at Phonogram, I think it was, said, we've got a good band here, but we need a good rhythm section.
Yeah.
And when Mark and I got the call, sort of saying, do you fancy coming just jamming with these guys in the studio, see what comes out?
That's a big call. I mean, like here you are, like session muso with Pete Townsend, right? Like your hero, and you're going, okay, should we leave that and go and start this band? Possibly could work.
Well, it was a strange time because not only I was just coming off the back of doing work with Townsend, but as you said in your introduction, I then had an opportunity to work with Chrissie and the Pretenders.
Yeah.
And I was literally being courted by Ian Grant to come and look at this outfit that was called Big Country. And then I was in the rehearsal studio with Chrissie and Martin, jamming what would be Back on the Chain Gang and the B-side, My City Was Gone. And I kind of thought to myself, what's going on? I couldn't work out how little old me from Shepherd's Bush was now, hanging out with these guys, working and playing with them. And then I had a sort of bit of a weird choice to make, because working with Chrissie and Pretenders was a dream.
Yeah.
Absolute dream.
Yeah.
But, I had to I thought to myself, well, is this something I'd like to do, more of? But after I finished doing it, and this is no detriment to the band, but I kind of thought, this is Chrissie's band. This is not a band anymore. Because the other two chaps were, who passed, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The Pretenders, that was the group. That was the four elements of that group. And I kind of felt it was going to turn into the Chrissie Hynde show, which fortunately it hasn't done it in retrospect. But I kind of thought, no, this is Chrissie's band. I want to be involved in something that, was 25% going to be me.
Yeah.
And country situations seemed to sort of suit that better for me. So as much as I enjoyed working with Chrissie and the Pretenders, I just didn't see, even if I did get an official kind of invitation to join the band, I don't know if I would have taken it because Big Country looked like a better prospect. And, the support that was being shown for it at the time, particularly by the record company and the manager, I thought, hang on, I'm going to sling my saddle on this horse.
So Ian Grant, who obviously was the one that introduced us and is part of the whole Think Loud project that we've been talking about in a lot of our episodes, he literally came to you and said, okay, I've got this band that we want you to be in. Oh, and I've got a record company that is interested in you as well. I mean, that's kind of like holding a pretty big golden carrot, isn't it, really?
It is, yeah, and it was something. Not that I like carrots, by the way.
No.
It was an opportunity, and I had to see it as an opportunity to do something and be involved in something. But I had such respect for Stuart. Before we even played a note, because he had such a great guitar style. His voice wasn't brilliant at the time, but it was worth persevering with. And, he had his little bit of a track record. Mark and I had our little bit of a track record, and it just seemed like, this is where to go. Having Ian Grant on board, though, I mean, he's a man who's seen success with a few other acts. So kind of got the impression that he knew what he was talking about. He knew what he was doing. He knew what to do in terms of, raising a brand new group and try to sort of do it, basically. And, so I felt myself silly if I kind of went, no, I'm going to go and play with the Pretenders because that's a nice gig and I can, earn a little bit of money, blah, blah, blah. No, I wanted a challenge.
Yeah. You were kind of labelled a Scottish rock outfit as well. Yeah. Yet you kind of weren't really, not all of you.
No, well, it was an easy press label to hang on the band because, the early sound of the band, particularly through Stuart's guitar playing, was about a Celtic flavour.
Yeah.
The fact that a majority of the songs that we were playing and the way that he played his guitar were in minor keys. He's quite a lamentable chap and he sings with that kind of very heavy Scottish brogue at the time. I mean, on first meeting Stuart, it's very difficult to understand him.
Yeah.
Because his Scottish accent was so deep. But even worse than that was Bruce. Bruce I couldn't understand at all. His Scottish accent was so deep that it took a while for me to sort of get my ears in tune with how they spoke. But there was an attitude towards the musical side of them, which was very, very north of the border. And I wasn't surprised when we were being dubbed, a Scottish band. Stuart's the head of the band. He was the vocal representation. They heard his Scottish accent. We're a Scottish band. Disregard the fact that I have Scottish heritage myself, but I didn't really promote that at the time because it wasn't necessary. But no, a lot of my family are from Scotland.
Yeah, but I guess at the time though, it was a big call because. I was talking with Kevin Rowland from Dexy's Midnight Runners, and he was saying that it was a hard time in the early 80s for Irish and Scottish bands to break the UK scene, but you guys did it really well.
Well, we did it well, but I don't think we did it well enough because I always kind of felt this kind of fault line between south of England and then anything north of Watford Gap. Anybody who knows where that is kind of 3/4 of the way down in England.
Yeah.
And everything else was northern. Yeah. And to be a northern band, Scottish band, it was always going to be harder to accept, to southern ears, southern audiences. Although touring, we sold out everywhere we went, it was the establishment, the music industry establishment, who really didn't take to us very kindly. Yeah. There's a few occasions which come to mind, which I'm not going to talk about. Yeah. But I kind of thought, hang on, you're not being fair here. Yeah. We're a great British band. We're not a great Scottish band. We're a great British band, which means we should be representing our islands, throughout, not just north of the border.
But you kind of did, though. To a certain extent. Like you were invited to Band Aid in 1984, and you were touring. You toured with Queen and Roger Daltry and U2. There was a pretty big respect for you guys.
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. I never begrudge anything that's happened to the band in terms of its acceptance. But we did feel at the time that it was going to be a little bit harder for us to get through to the London music scene. We were never a trendy band. So if you're not a trendsetter, if you're not there to do all the crap stuff that you're supposed to do, like most pop bands had to do, then they weren't interested in you, and we certainly weren't interested in being sort of comic strip celebrities just because people in London who want to promote that sort of stuff wanted us to be, and we weren't. We were a hard-working live band, and wherever we played, it was great. There was none of that kind of nonsense on that score. It was just more sort of industry level with an acceptance level. We even had problems when we went on the old Grey Whistle test once.
Right.
It felt like we were put on because somebody said, "Well, you better put this band on because they're quite popular."
Yeah,
there was never a big kind of, "Whoa, it's really nice to have you guys on this program." And I think I'd probably put that down. That was represented quite clearly by the people who were presenting the program at the time. It wasn't Bob, but you kind of got that feeling. Okay, they've got us on here quite begrudgingly, so we'll do what we need to do.
Yeah,
and then we'll get out of your faces because we've got better things to do.
We kind of had a similar thing in Australia with a show called Countdown, where it was like the show that everyone had to go on to, and a lot of bands, like that, they clamored for it. But then there were other bands that was just like, well, Midnight Oil was the perfect example. Well, if you're not going to let us, actually play live, and we're not going to, lip sync, so you can get stuff. We won't do it.
Yeah, the pressures of the business, kind of you might have an attitude, but sometimes you've got to put that attitude aside just to help in the promotion of your own group and getting your name out there.
Yeah.
So we swallowed a lot of shit from that time.
Yeah.
And it certainly wasn't detrimental to the band at all. But I think, when people talk about Britain, great British bands, I sometimes feel as though we're further down the list than we should be. But then again, a lot of good British bands from around the islands, and we're kind of in a similar place. But anything south of Watford, band wise, they were always up there, being punted, touted, and blah blah blah. How great they are and stuff like that. But that sort of
I kind of put you into like when you're talking about bands like U2 and the Alarm and Simple Minds, Big Country. Like you're in. It's a very different scene, like you said, but it's a pretty cool scene to be in.
Yeah, I just you mentioning those bands. I mean, I remember playing at Croker Park in Dublin with probably one of the best lineups of the time that we were involved with. I mean, it was U2, Simple Minds, Big Country, The Alarm, Eurythmics, all in one afternoon.
Wow!
I mean, I think it's a pretty good ticket, and probably one of the best gigs that we played as a support back in the days when we supported U2 at Nottingham Theatre Royal. I mean, that was a ticket. That was that night.
So as a kid growing up, like you guys were, all the bands that you just mentioned, you guys, Simple Minds, Eurythmics, you were the bands that especially in Australia, we really looked up to because it was different. It was edgy,
Certainly was, and it's and the significance of me mentioning that is because that lineup wouldn't have been as special if it was in London.
Yeah.
The fact it was in Dublin just made it huge, super huge. So, we've been very lucky, and we had been unlucky in other areas, but that's what happens in, the music business.
Yeah. Do you think working with producer Steve Lillywhite right out of the gate was one of the best choices that you guys made? I mean, like, he was responsible for shaping the sound of U2 and Peter Gabriel and Susie and the Banshees and Morrissey,
Well, that nearly didn't happen.
Right, okay.
Because of the strings being pulled together, because myself and Mark had worked with Chris Thomas on myself with the Pretenders and also, a couple of Pete Townsend albums, but at that time. So I knew Chris Thomas quite well. And the fact, then I got invited to do the Pretenders stuff. When it came to Big Country, or everybody kind of thought that maybe Chris Thomas might be the guy to produce, Big Country right off the bat. And I don't think anybody looked at it close enough to think that there might be a clash of characters.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things I knew Chris, I knew his sense of humor, blah blah blah. But what we didn't realize is that Chris Thomas would not have any affinity with Stuart or Bruce.
Right.
They spoke a different language as far as he was concerned. Yeah. And when we were recording the album, there was certainly there wasn't the great excitement that we all expected to be recording our first album. We were at Air Studios in central London back in the day. So, we're right at the top of the tree, when it comes to a band making its first album. And then all of a sudden it just went sour.
Yeah. Right.
But we had a very magnanimous head of A&R back then, a chap called Chris Briggs, who he saw what was going on, and he realized that it wasn't, it's not working out, but had the faith to continue and invest in moving on. And that's when Steve came on the scene.
Right.
And bloody hell, wasn't that a good move?
Oh, great move.
I mean, he came in as a breath of fresh air. Steve had all the affinity and characterization to get on with Stuart.
Yeah.
and Bruce and myself, well, Bruce and Mark, myself, and I mean, Steve absolutely loved Mark as a drummer. You know, Mark could do no wrong as far as Steve was concerned. And we hit it off from day one. And, you know, all the recordings that we did, that was the excitement of the band's first album there and then. So no disrespect to Chris Thomas, but wow, that felt like a new band coming out with their first album. And it was a pleasure to be at the studio. And I started a new concept for myself. I was almost Steve Lillywhite's shadow because I wanted to learn about production. And I sat with him every day, every hour, and watched what he did and enjoyed watching him doing his job. And I saw, you know, how he pushed every individual to creating their best. And I saw how hard he made Stuart work, particularly on the vocal. And that was impressive. That was somebody who took the nurturing lane. Okay, we're going to come up with something very professional and high quality, but you know, there's lanes 1, 2, and 3 to get to, and that's how he worked, and that's what he did. And I think how he worked and got Stuart to perform was excellent, godsend.
There's a lot of truth in the fact that the right producer will create the right album, you know, and I really believe that if he didn't have that involvement, that Big Country wouldn't have got the start that it really needed to. You know, so he's almost like the fifth member. It's almost like a George Martin and the Beatles. You know, it's like he's like the fifth Beatle.
Yeah, I think in my experience and knowledge of producers at that time, I think my idea that a producer was somebody who, you know, it's like walking into a university college and walk into the room and there's a lecturer who you had to just stand there and listen to, accept, and pay homage to, because that person is going to teach you and you didn't say anything, you didn't have anything else to do but to learn. But with a producer, it's about relationship, and it's about utilizing the relationship on a professional and a friendship level in order to produce a high quality performance. And that's what it's all about. High quality performance. Get the best out of your artist in order. And it's not just getting any of us to do what we do well, to get it gelling in a way that it creates the overview. I mean, the crossing, I think, probably taught us how we sounded.
Yeah.
I think you can stand in a rehearsal room and play songs and think, yeah, this is cool, and get off on it, blah, blah, blah. But when you hear it coalesce on a recording, and then that recording's taken away from you, and then you come back and then listen to it again and think, wow, is that how we sound? Wow, that's great. That's got a real character to it, which is why I think the crossing worked, because it was the characterization of the band and the sound and the playing really came together through Steve.
Yeah. Yeah, and you had some big songs, so some massive songs, and of course, you know, In a Big Country is in Australia where I am. I mean, that was the song that really hit the charts, you know. But you guys had 9 albums, throughout your career. Peace in Our Time, which was your 4th album, you chose to launch that one in Moscow. What was the thinking and the reason behind that?
Well, when we go from the crossing to Steeltown, I think one of the things that we had as a band was to represent ourselves in our lives at the time. So we had just come flush from the success of the crossing, spending nearly 2 years on the road promoting it, having a great time, getting a bit burned. Because by the time we got to Australia, well, we were supposed to come to Australia from Japan, Stuart was then on a short fuse to burnout.
Yeah,
he was cooked. He was done, and we all were. I'm not going to place all the emphasis on him, but we were all done. And I think the decision not to go to Australia and then take some time out was a wise move by the band's management. But we then had to come back and start a new project, which I don't think we were that ready to do because we spent so much time not working on new material. I mean, when we did, we only got a few ideas, and one of the ideas that we did manage to sort of eke out, which I think gave us all a little bit more incentive, was when we did Wonderland.
Yeah, right.
Because that was a separate recording. And when we finished Wonderland, again, produced by Steve, we kind of thought, okay, there's some mileage here now. We've got somewhere to go. And then Steel Town turned out to this really bleak sort of representation of life in Britain at the time, and it was a very heartfelt story of our lives through Stuart Adams's lyrics.
It was kind of like the Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. You know,
yes.
you've gone through like that, and then you've gone to Nebraska, right?
Exactly. Whereas the dichotomy is that the record company want Crossing too.
Yeah, right.
And that was never going to happen because, you know, we're forward thinking, or we wanted to. Maybe the heart was there, but the spirit had been bashed. So we needed time to repair that. So, and then Steel Town came out. Yes, it did really well, and you know, people acknowledged it, but the record company didn't see it like that, which made the seer even harder, because then we started thinking, right, we need to expand ourselves. You know, we're not going to be the same. We're not going to do The Crossing again. We're not going to do Steel Town again. What should we do? So we get this really lovely man called Robin Miller to come and produce us. And it was a real experience working with somebody who came from such a different musical background. And there was a lot of respect going on during those studio sessions, and the work that went on was fantastic. And it had some high points as well, because we got to work with Kate Bush.
Yeah.
Now, you've never seen four dribbling messes as we saw in that studio when Kate Bush came to the studio to work on the track The Seer, and it was just a phenomenal sort of thing. And there's a real high point for us, because it was like, yeah, you know, we're Big Country and she's Kate Bush and we're working together, and yeah, but you know, but that spawned its own problems, because by that time the background nonsense was going on. You know, the record company shifts, of new personnel being put in charge of your project. You know, it was like being some conglomerate company, and you know, the person who was the architect of that particular product had left, and somebody else took over that product. They didn't particularly like it.
Yeah,
and you know, we started getting all these sort of horrendous situations, like the then person who took over in A&R bringing an outsider in to remix an album and add guitars to a Big Country guitar album. I mean, for F's sake,
yeah,
you know, that's why? And you know, and it's all these things that create these animosities between artists and record companies.
Yeah.
So by the time The Seer came out, you know, we were being squashed creatively. We were being squashed identically. We were being, and all of a sudden, you know, when they say that you feel the rug being pulled out from under your feet, well, that's when we first sort of felt the financial rug being pulled from underneath us. And you know, the promotion wasn't there. The interest from the people who were working at the record company at the time was lukewarm, because possibly the new people who were brought in to look after our product saw us as has-beens already. And the whole thing just felt really, really just uncomfortable. So to come back to your original point, by the time we get to Peace Now Time, you know, we're kind of well, where do we go from here? What do we do? What's the best thing for us to do? So we thought maybe America might be the point to sort of look at, because we had a new relationship with a new American record company, who decided that, you know, they were quite interested in doing it. But as with the Americans, they want things done their way. So we had to work with a producer that we didn't really know much about. We didn't really think had much in common with the band. We had brand new record company people who we didn't know. And, you know, it's the first time that the band had recorded in America, which was nice. I really enjoyed that. That's not a problem. But then all of a sudden it was about, okay, we need to maximize all of this now. What's the best way of doing that? So the idea came, so we're recording this album called Peace Now Time in America. Glasnost was big news at the time in Russia, the old USSR. And, the idea that, and there was also another focal point, which was the Hard Rock Cafe in Russia. Ian Grant had got very friendly with a guy who was running the Hard Rock Cafe in Moscow. And I think the seeds of that idea was planted from then. Why don't we go and play in Russia? Why don't we launch the album in Russia? So I think it spawned that. But what Ian Grant had to do was carry the British record company with us in order to expedite it. And that was a problem within itself. That was a huge problem, because you've got a company who's got this band who they probably think, okay, we've probably had the best out of them. We're not going to put as much money into promotion as we'd like, but the management are telling us they've got this huge idea to help promote it, and it's going to need a bit of cash, and it's going to need a bit of work done on it, and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly we find ourselves on a flight with 250 odd journalists going to Moscow to start this thing off. And a lot of people going, well, Big Country aren't really Wham, are they? They're just another little rock band who are trying to sort of replace U2, and not thoroughly believing in it. Yeah. So it's, again, another record company issue, which made It's Now Time a disturb, because then that pissed off the Americans going to Moscow.
I was going to say, it's almost like sticking the middle finger up at the Americans, saying, well,
and so by the time we sort of faced Americans, sort of bring that album to America, they didn't want to know. They didn't want to know. So so we had this really good album recorded in America, brought to the public in the USSR, and then when we went to come and do the stuff, I think we had a few British tours and stuff, but going to America with that was just didn't seem to be on the cards, and the American record company just disappeared.
Yeah, wow,
just disappeared. So Big Country's formative years up until, say, Peace Now Time was about politics. It was about record company politics. It was about investment. It was about people being involved that didn't want to be involved. Because by the, we'd lost a lot of the support systems by that time. We'd lost Steve. Well, it's not as if we lost Steve. It was everybody thought, well, we've done two albums with him. Yeah, let's find somebody else. And then we went from Robin Miller to sorry, I forget this guy's name now.
The American guy.
The American Austrian.
Yeah.
Wolf.
Oh yes.
Peter Wolf. And I think we'd gone through a lot of stuff that people wouldn't have known about, to be honest, which we didn't sort of go to town telling people about, because it didn't seem worth it. We want to be recognized for what we do, not how we're being put together by other people, or the lack of it by that time. So, Big Country was going to be a difficult prospect from that point anyway.
Do you think that you had, was there a point during that lead up or where you knew that you'd reached that tipping point and that it was starting to flick back over the other side?
Yes, because with everything that I've just described to you, the one thing that was going on behind the business, behind the politics, was the losing of Stuart Adamson. He was being. We were all very conscious that been working hard. Nobody was unhappy about being in the band, but we had this thing called alcoholism. Yeah, raises up the head with both Stuart and Bruce at the time, and that was something that we had to kind of try and deal with as a band. But I don't think we dealt with it very well because two of us were and two of us weren't. And that sort of brought something to the mix, which wasn't kind of, it was a little bit uneasy from that point of view. So by the time we got to start working on all the other albums. We always felt, to use a lyric from Stewart, we're always fighting against the tide.
Yeah.
From that point of view, and it's not until we got to Driving to Damascus, which I thought at the time, I don't want to over dramatize it, but it felt like a little bit of a rebirth, because we'd found our feet, we'd found a new strain of creativity that we all seemed to be enjoying. The bombshell came when we realized that Stuart was still drinking.
And sort of, I want to talk about this, and I don't really want to talk too much about his death, but because it's been very well documented. But I want to talk about the lead up to that and then the fallout from that. So he actually went missing. There was even a message placed on the band's website asking fans to let us know if you know his whereabouts. Yeah.
Well, it's a situation as I remember it. We'd finished recording Driving to Damascus. We were all really pleased with it. We all had, we all thought everything was cool. We realized that Stuart was still having a problem, but we just wanted to try and help him and help him deal with it in any little way that we could. Anyway, so as with every album, there's a sort of short hiatus, and then it's back in the studio, back working towards touring. And by this time, we were getting a lot of good reaction from the single. The first single that was going to be put out was called Fragile Thing.
Yeah.
And Radio 2 here in Britain was really pushing it.
Yeah.
And it was a very well respected track, and it seemed like it was going to do well. Our predictions for top 40 for the single, and and so on and so forth, was looking really good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this bombshell hit us, which was based on the fact that the packaging, one of the packaging formats, didn't conform to the chart return organization's rules and regulations, which meant that where the single was going to chart top 40, it barely hit 70 because they disqualified all of the sales with this particular packaging on. Now, to say that Stuart was in a fragile state was borne out by this news, because after that, I think he lost all wanting to be part of this industry, to be part of the band. I think he just lost it completely, because it was such a traumatic thing. We were sitting, we got the news, we were sitting in a record shop in a main street in Glasgow at Tower Records doing a signing, great atmosphere. And then we get hit with this news. And it's like, God, talking about, sorry to use his expression, but everything fell out of our asses that day.
Yeah.
Complete knockback.
Yeah.
That the fact that some organization, that people we don't even know, were going to curtail our progress because their stupid rules and regulations stopped, because of a box. So, well, that's a business, that's a system, that's how good. But that killed Big Country.
Yeah.
In itself, right there, because after that it became a problem. So, again, you say, what, he went missing, manager putting out messages on the band's website saying, do you know where Stuart is, and blah, blah, blah. That was the beginning of the end in that respect, because it killed the band. It really killed off the band.
Yeah.
And especially when we had really good hopes for that album, because we thought we were onto, a new strain of Big Country, a new lease of life with decent support. But
I'd like to read a little bit from your book, actually, because you put this in the foreword of your book, and you said, in fact, that you have deliberately not written about the history of Big Country during the Stuart Adamson era, that it has already been documented or will be by someone else. I need to write about how I and my former colleagues dealt with certain aspects of his death and the collapse of the band as I saw it. And what came next was a struggle for life, identity, employment, friendships, honesty, and fallout.
Mm.
it, that's a really like everything just collapsed.
It did. It did. And I never said this before, but so I think it's quite right that I do mention it. Somebody told me once that they were talking to Pete Townsend about me,
Mm.
and he said, "I feel sorry for Townsend because one day everything's going to collapse around him." And I don't know whether he meant that personally or in life in general, but he was right.
Yeah.
I don't know what insight he had, whether it's into the band or myself. I mean, I don't know, but I was always intent on not collapsing myself, but I can't control everything that goes on around me. But he was absolutely right. The band collapsed for so many different unsavory reasons.
Mm.
And and it left us all in I don't think I've ever been to limbo before. And I know
Yeah.
what limbo is now, and it's not a nice place. And I think my first reaction was, do I want to carry on doing this? No, because Big Country were a unique item in my head.
Yeah.
And without the four of us doing what we were doing, it's not going to be anything that I think I'd like to be part of. So I made a very early sort of gesture to myself and to everybody around me that post Stuart, I won't be part of the band. It's over. It's done. But it's amazing how, I kind of felt like a football at the end of their football career. At a young age you've got to retire, but you've still got a life in front of you, and so what do? And I wasn't going to do the Sergeant Bilko thing and sit down and look at Big Country videos for the rest of my life. I wanted to move on. I wanted to move forward. I've taught myself to write songs during my time during Big Country. I've made a lot of, I think, very good bits and pieces towards the band, songwriting wise. So why don't I just carry on doing it myself? But I didn't want to get into the music industry thing about becoming a solo artist. I couldn't be asked with that. Really, I just wanted to write songs. I wanted to be in a great band. I was in a great band. I want to write songs. I will do that, but not necessarily be a music industry whore in order to achieve that. So that paragraph, my foreword, was just me being as honest as I saw my own personal canvas being quite blank. And I think that was really important for me to let people know that's how I felt. And with no accusations, I don't blame anybody for anything apart from the fact it happened was something that we'd all have to get used to. But I knew that my attitude would not be in tandem with other people's attitude, because I was always being encouraged to reform the band or get back in the band, turn it into a super group, blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't interested, really wasn't interested.
So 20 years on, 22 years on, you've done the solo thing, you've written a book, you took over lead singing of Big Country for a while then even.
Yeah, kind of. I did it because, again, I'd say we were being encouraged to sort of maybe put a group together and get other people, get some other names in and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't very comfortable with it. But I think what was offered to me at the time was an anniversary, I think it was. And I thought, well, why don't the three of us just do this as a three-piece? So we could show our respect to Stuart. This is the three guys he's left behind. Okay, mate, thank you for that. We're just going to pay some homage to you as a three-piece. It wasn't a real attempt at turning the band into a three-piece commodity. And Bruce and I decided that we're going to take the vocals on together. But to me, that fitted the concept. It certainly wasn't a view for, because I know that I'm not the greatest singer, and I know that when I sang with Stuart, we were a great blend. But without Stuart, my voice don't sound very good. So, that was never a concept. Bruce has got his own style of singing, which really makes, okay, so we've not really heard that before, but it's not big enough to take forward in any kind of real practical and practical way. So just doing that little anniversary thing was just a way of us getting through that. Okay, so it's a 25th anniversary, blah blah blah. We've done that. We've paid our respects. Now let's leave it alone. But I did get pulled in again later, and this was because I think in 2009.
Yeah, Kirsty
McCall's thing. Yeah, I mean, I think the BBC Radio 2 were going to hold a concert in her memory. Now, when I was told about this, I thought, first thing I thought to myself, I can't be churlish enough to sort of say to the rest of the guys, no, I don't want it to do it because of my own reasons. I had too much respect for Steve, too much love for Kirsty to say, no, I don't want to be part of it. I just couldn't see myself. I'd rather put myself in a situation I wasn't comfortable with it and do it than let everybody down. So, I said to the guys, right, well, let's do it, but we need to find a singer. By this time, Bruce had already been speaking to Mike Peters from The Alarm. And I thought, okay, no, that's cool. I think that will work. But the concert never happened.
Right.
So I kind of thought, oh, this is an out for me. Then I can drop out again. But they said, well, look, whilst everybody's in situ, why don't we do something? And I went, oh, all right then, a bit churlishly, but I did. And initially the idea was interesting, but as the gigs rolled on, and then when we started to try to do new material, I went off the boil.
Yeah,
I really didn't feel comfortable. I didn't think. I kind of felt like I don't want to be in my own karaoke band.
Yeah,
I don't want to be in my tribute band. And I kind of grinned and bared, and I was totally honest with Bruce and Mark, because I mean those guys are my brothers. I was totally honest with them all the way through. Just said, look, I don't know if we can do this. And then when we tried to put a new song together, we jammed a lot on sound checks and stuff. And then I thought, well, here's a test for Mike. What can he come up with lyrically and vocally to an idea that we put together? And it came up with this thing called Another Country, which put me off straight away. To be honest, it was a pastiche. It was too much like in the book of writing big country songs. Yeah, and it didn't ring true to me. And then And then Ian, in his own ubiquitous way of making or trying to make things work all the time, because Ian Grant is somebody who doesn't stand still. If he sees an opening for something to happen, he'll push through and try and do it, which is what's made him a great manager all the way through this. And I know that we're going to go on to discuss another aspect of his passion in this. But with this recording, and then he managed to get Steve back on board. To do the recording, which on one hand it was great to be recording with Steve again, but I could tell that Steve's attitude wasn't too dissimilar to mine. There was something about all of us going through the motions of doing it, but not doing it in a way that things were done before. So by the time we finished it, and I can't wait to get away from this. And I really didn't enjoy it. And so in 2012, I jumped ship. Yeah, I thought that's enough. Yeah, really thought that's it. And the guys, I gave them my blessings to carry on with the band in whatever shape or form they wanted to do. Because that's what they want to do. But I got to live my life too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've kept in contact with everyone. You've kept in contact with Ian, obviously.
I've always been, like with Steve Lillywhite. I took a great interest in production, but having one of Britain's greatest managers, you couldn't not sort of pay attention to what he did. And I had great respect for him and how he did his job and how he went about his business, because it's he's had a difficult time managing this group. Managing Stuart, it's and he had a lot of experience of managing the Stranglers. So Big Country should have been, like bottle feeding.
Should be a walk in the park, really, shouldn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. So, but the whole idea of the band sort of dissipating, and I think really it really didn't work for Ian. Trying to get things to work when so many other things were rubbing against the stone, and then Stuart passing away, and or what are we going to do now? And he has a philosophy of taking all of that always into account and wanting to try and do something, but not always coming up with the best ways of doing it or making people disagreeable to how he did things, which is where the kind of impetus for the Great Divide came from. Because I thought my attitude was, I think if I want to have a relationship with either the remainder of the band or with Ian Grant, I kind of thought Ian Grant was the way I want to go with, because I like what he does. If I want to do anything in the future managerially, I've got somebody on board already who I can refer to.
Yeah.
With the band was going to, I don't mean this nastily, but the band were going to slip down into second, third division.
Yeah.
Sort of feat group, and that wasn't going to go forward. Their ambition was not to do anything or anything new, where all I want to do is new stuff. I want to write, and I want to keep that kind of aspect of why I got into the group going. And Ian was going to be on hand if I needed, so I needed to support him. But there was a lot of underlying stuff that was going on, and so the great divide came from that, really. But I just wanted to document. Bruce, Mark, and I never fell out.
Yeah.
And not to this day have we fallen out. We've just gone different ways. We have different ideas, and I think that's all right. We're allowed to. It's a democratic society that we live in, but we've always got to remember that the reason why we're in this situation is because Stuart left us.
Yeah, and
I think that always brings everything back down to square one. That's why we're here. Let's not argue about it. Let's not pull ourselves to pieces about it. It's just that was the fact, and the more the band or the remainder of us could keep that kind of lid on it, I think our collective hope was that it wouldn't be such a burden on Stuart's relations he's left behind.
Yeah,
because we were a family band, and Stuart's family. We all had our kids running around soundtracks back in the early days. We were a family band, and I don't want to do anything disrespectful to his family or say anything disrespectful, because I don't think it's necessary.
They don't deserve it. Exactly. Yeah,
and they don't deserve it. And whatever people think about the subject of suicide, we've all got our own philosophies, but I don't think, for me, is something that I want to discuss in public. It's just what I feel. But what I will say publicly is the fact that it's a shame he did what he did, because we lost a great entity as an individual. Yeah. But we lost a progression of the group that I think would have. I think we may even play Glastonbury. I was talking to somebody in my local pub the other night, saying that I don't think there's not many groups who really could deserve the kind of banner headline of Glastonbury anymore. Bands are dying out. Big bands, great bands, they're all gone. Fortunately, we had Elton John, who really fitted that bill.
Didn't he? Yeah.
Unless Zeppelin reform, there's no big bands.
It was good to see the Pretenders up there. I have to say.
Yes, I missed that, so I didn't see that. But I think, Big Country never played Glastonbury as Big Country.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I don't know. But not Bruce, it was Mark, Stuart, and I. We were Ray Davies's backing band in 1997. So I have been to Glastonbury, but not as Big Country.
Yeah, right.
But that was a blast in itself, going back to, all the people who I've had the great joy of working with.
Yeah.
Playing really got me with the architect of that song was just mind-blowing.
Yeah. How sensational would that be?
But for Big Country to have played, it sounds like Big Country not only had its successes, but it had its near misses as well, because we've never played Glastonbury, but also we never got to play Live Aid.
Yeah,
Because whatever the circumstances were. So Big Country have always missed things. I mean, we also missed a tour with Daryl Hall and John Oates in America, which would have done the band lots of good.
That would have.
But all these things happen for the reasons which we've been talking about over the past half a year.
And so now, obviously, talking about other things that are happening, Ian Grant is going through the whole Parkinson disease issue. And, you talk about him as a manager and not wanting to give up and wanting to see things through. That's really what is happening with him and the whole Think Loud project, right? Yeah,
definitely. Well, it's kind of strange because as I didn't play on the track Think Loud, I wasn't really aware of what he was doing, because as I've been for the past sort of couple of years, very aware of his condition, very aware that there's certain things that he doesn't need in his life anymore, which is the trials and tribulations of a band gone tits up, and and everything that was incurred during that time. So although I've been a staunch supporter and part of his life, I've kind of wheeled back a bit, because he doesn't need that sort of stuff in his life because of what he's going through. When he sent me the track Think Loud, I listened to it. I thought, okay, that's okay, it's good. But I couldn't work out who was singing, because this pseudo rock voice from the 70s, and I kind of who's that? On a subsequent phone call, I said to him, "Who's that?" And he says, "Did you not recognise it was Leo?" What? Leo Sayer?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, gosh, the last time I heard about Leo Sayer, he was being thrown out of the Big Brother house under duress and stress and making a bit of a dick of himself. But I thought, okay, I'll take that. And then he said, look, we're putting together, these Zoom video things. Would I mind doing something? Well, I said, I didn't play on it. I said, no, it'd just be nice to be part of it. So I did. And that's how I got involved. And the reason why I'm sort of happy to be part of the promotion of it is because of simply, I've never known anybody in my life who's had Parkinson's.
Yeah.
I've seen Ian's deterioration over the past 5-6 years, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I cannot again stand back and sort of say, look, awareness is a kind of funny thing, because I've been through an awareness drive before, because 2 members of my family, my ex-wife and my youngest daughter, both had ME, which I think is called myalgic encephalitis.
Yes.
Now, both of them had the condition back in the late 80s and I was touring all the time with the band. And it was a terrible thing to have to deal with, because, the wife's laid up, can't move, can't do anything. And then subsequently my 8-year-old daughter, exactly the same thing. And then you sort of say, well, I don't know anything about this. Why don't I know anything about it? And then you get involved in the charities that help people. And then you do an awareness single. So I'd already been through that. So I knew what Ian was doing with this particular thing. And I think, although sometimes you do an awareness single, to get the message to sit, it needs people to be involved with. It's not just one or two people. It needs an array of people to be involved, for other people to sit up and take notice. Which is why there's a lot of names on the list of people who are.
I think he pulled in the who's who of everyone he's worked with. Really,
he's certainly done, and I think that's out of respect for him as a past manager of great bands. Plus the fact that he's still got that power to bring people in. Yeah. So I'm very happy to be part of the promotion of this, even though I didn't play on this one.
Yeah.
So I did my little bit for the video, which is cool. It's easy to sit in front of a computer and, I just thought, oh, I got a piece of paper and put Think Loud on it, because traditionally, all my life, I've been told that I'm soft-spoken.
Yes.
And the one thing I have to do, particularly with things like these interviews, I've got to say to myself,
Think loud.
think,
Yeah.
well, think loud,
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm heard. So I understand the basic concept of it, but I didn't realize it was part of the thought process of somebody who's got Parkinson's,
Yeah.
because basically the louder you think, the more you get all your bits and pieces together in order to communicate. So I think it's really important. So, I'm glad that the record is getting as much press appreciation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see I can see it from my own perspective. And I really, it's not so untypical of Ian Grant to be involved in something like this and doing it the way he does, because that's what he's always done. I once in a Melody Maker interview called Ian the Svengali manager of rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's, I've read a lot of books about lots of band managers, and as far as I know, he hasn't hung anybody out of third-story windows or carried a gun to make sure people pay up on time, or he's been a bloody decent chap, and he's he works the system as any good manager should do, and he's had a great innings of it, but I need to see him stabilize now, because this Parkinson's, it's getting very difficult for him to communicate with people.
Yeah, no, it is terrible. It's terrible. Well, we're doing what we're doing, and hopefully the song will get greater reach as it gets picked up. So,
Yeah, well, I hope so. Because all of a sudden, when you realise the memory of your family's got something that it's not on the public awareness charts, it's very difficult to get people to fully comprehend it. And this drive to bring this to the public, I think, is valid. Yeah, and I think and I can only thank everybody who has been involved for letting me be involved as well.
Yes, yes. Now, just to wrap up, two quick questions. One is we've gone through your whole story, and we've gone through the rise and fall of Big Country. And it wouldn't be fair of me to say, would you do anything different? But are there things that you wish had have been different, that you look back now and go, if only I had done this then?
To be honest, no, because I've always been slightly pragmatic about things, and things happen for reasons, and particularly those reasons are beyond my control. And a lot of stuff that goes on in them, and it's not just with Big Country, it's a music business. Things happen that that sometimes you don't even know about them until a later date. Yeah. And I think, well, how can I consciously think about that when I didn't even know in the first place? Yeah. And it affects your life because decisions are taken. A good example, and this is not a bad example, going back to that period between Steeltown, or between the Crossing and Steeltown, the band itself, we did Wonderland, which was great. Yeah. But then what I didn't know at the time was that Stuart was already working on the soundtrack to the film Restless Natives. Right. So it was a complete eye-opener when it was brought to our attention, because Stuart had about 3 or 4 songs prepared for this film, and all of a sudden, we're in the studio recording it, and I'm thinking, well, what's all this about? And then we're being shown rushes of this film and blah, blah, blah. So we get into it. But to me, that wasn't really a Big Country project, purely and simply that we weren't really involved until the recording of it. Yeah. Now, all these things, just to give an example of what goes on behind, closed doors or whatever, was something that was not foisted on us, but it was brought to us at a late stage. And I kind of thought, well, I wish we had a bit more time to work on this, because number one, I think it could be really good, because some of the stuff that he wrote for it was fantastic. But I think given the chance to go through the Big Country mill, working mill, when it could be a lot better. I was always unhappy about the recording, although we had one of the masters of recording at the helm, which was Jeff Emmerich. Yeah. It's for me, the recording was inferior to anything that we'd done before and since. So that's kind of one of the sort of situations that one found themselves in. But I was not going to cause trouble or fuss about it, because, okay, this is what it is. Move on.
Yeah.
So I like to be pragmatic about stuff. I don't like to find faults unless faults present themselves to me. But it certainly makes you aware of how you've got to be and develop yourself within the craft and the industry, because you've got to find a way of surviving. Which is why after Stuart passed, I went into teaching.
Yeah.
I just thought there's not many people out there who have been in my position who could go out to the coalface and show kids who want to be part of this industry, what it is. Why is it? In certain bands, some people have more money than others. It's because there's a writer and there's the others, and then there's a drummer.
Maybe they get paid, maybe they don't.
Exactly, but it's things like that, and it's just the basic workings of what goes on in the band. I think I wanted to bring to the public. It's not something I put in a news report or a book. It's something you have to stand there in front of people and sort of teach and show them what to do. Which is why I got into teaching. Yeah, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I hope for the period of time that I was doing it, some people have benefited from it. But it certainly wasn't available to me when I was a kid.
Yeah,
a lot of the stuff just doesn't manifest itself until you're actually in situ.
I think it's important too, because it's something that kids need to I believe not lose touch with, especially in this modern day. Getting back to basics with music. Yeah, and
absolutely. There's enough of them people out there who are running the business who are making a lot more money than the kids will ever make, and certainly people like me. I've been through the mill. There are people who are a lot richer than me because their knowledge of what we were doing was far better than mine.
Yeah.
So I think education.
That's it. Last question. What are you listening to right now? What's on your turntable?
I don't have one.
Or your iPod, or your.
This is weird, but I don't listen to music because I'm always making music. I don't stop. I've got a lovely little recordings studio set up here. I do everything myself. I've worked. Oh God, I've got so much stuff here that I've got a pile of CDs here. There's one that's my first, The Great Unknown.
Yeah.
There's the awareness record I did for ME, One Day to the Next. There's a band called Dog that I played with, which were basically my college cohorts, fellow people out there. I did an album with a colleague of mine called Tom Norden, who we did something that we'd never done, crossing rock music with dance.
Wow, yeah.
And I wrote an album which basically was guitar rock, but with dance beats.
Yeah.
And again, all this stuff was just put out on the internet, put it out through Amazon. So no great promotional stuff. We do it, finish it, get it out there. Yeah. And I'm currently working on another project of which I haven't got the faintest idea what I'm going to do with it, but I've just written a Christmas song.
Right.
After years and years of people saying to me, why don't you write a Christmas song? Why don't you write a Christmas song? Anyway, I've written a Christmas song. It's in the hands of my publisher, and I don't particularly want to record it myself, but if it sees the light of day, I should be extremely happy, and you'll see this.
You've got 4 months.
Well, probably not till 24 now. So, but no, I'm always writing. I'm always doing stuff. I will have another internet project by this time next year. So I don't stop. I just don't want to tour anymore. I'm in a different place now. I've got 4 grandkids of my own, plus a step granddaughter. My kids are growing up around me and watching me get old disgracefully, and I'm relatively happy. But as I say, I'm really bad. I don't listen to other people's music, and I don't listen to big country at all.
Tony Butler, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure and an absolute eye-opener as well.
Well, thank you, Shane. And also, thank you for reading the book.
Loved it.
Because I don't get a lot of feedback about the book. And I felt a little bit guilty when I finished it, because I've never been one for sort of telling tales out of school, but I tried to write it in a way that it didn't. And, and I self-edited myself, because, there's things that people should know, and things that people, it's not going to help their lives by knowing certain things. So, it's quite a short book in that respect, but it was a short space in time.
Yeah, fantastic. Tony, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shane.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Long Way to the Top. Hit plus or follow to subscribe to the podcast, and head over to Facebook at the Long Way to the Top podcast and give us a like. Keep on rocking, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Long Way to the Top.